right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I imagine we'll have some folks continue to join, but I know everyone's time is valuable. So welcome to everyone on this call. Thank you for making the time to join today. Hopefully you're all safe and warm with the wintry weather out there. My name is Jen Gleason, and I'm the Managing Director of Social Venture Partners Philadelphia, or SVP for short. SVP's mission is to foster a community of engaged leaders, strengthen social impact organizations, and invest in collaborative solutions, building powerful relationships to reduce intergenerational poverty in our region. We are a philanthropic network made up of a diverse group of individuals across multiple sectors in Philadelphia: business leaders, retirees, young professionals, and social change leaders. We are currently 43 partners strong and continue to grow our network here in Philadelphia. Our partners commit to working alongside, learning from, and amplifying community-driven poverty alleviation efforts. We have been intentional in engaging community stakeholders in shaping our model and our approach in Philadelphia, and actively continue to broaden the diversity within our leadership and our partner network. On behalf of SVP, we are excited to learn more about your work through this process. Now I would like to invite SVP partners Eriks Dunens and Francesca Rossi to introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eriks Dunens. I am a partner in SVP Philadelphia, and I'm also the chair of the investment committee. When I'm not involved with SVP, I spend a little bit of time in my day job as head of engineering at Arco Technologies, a software consulting company. Francesca?
Thanks, you guys. I'm Francesca Rothside. And I am also a partner, and I'm on Eriks committee, investment and capacity building. And I joined SVP after I met Jen, our fearless leader. And she and I discussed how SVP was really an innovative organization in Philadelphia, because as you may have experienced, most grant makers actually do a great job making grants. And then there are other groups that do a great job helping with organizational capacity. But what I loved about the model of SVP is that we do both. So we look at the substance of an organization and see what they do and how important that is. And then we look at the process also to see if they can get it done with the amount of staff they have and the energy they have and the community presence they have. And lots of times as grant makers, if an organization has one but not the other, they don't get a grant, right? Because if it's a great idea but they can't get it done, you can't give them money. Or if they can get it done but they don't have a good idea, you don't want to give them money. But SVP brings both of those things together. So we can engage and learn more about our community and be more helpful to our community by both giving money and helping the organization where it needs help and wants help. So we can be true partners, and that was very exciting to me, and that's the reason I joined.
Thank you, Francesca. I'll introduce myself next. My name is Eriks Dunens, and I am an associate with Social Venture Partners, which means that I exist to really serve and support the work of our partners like Francesca, like Eriks, like a few other folks on this call today, as they really seek to invest meaningfully in communities, both with funds like Francesca talked about, but also with organizational capacity and support. And so as we get started today, I just wanted to make a few notes. The first thing that I'll share is that this informational webinar is really focused on our 2021 investment cycle. And while we hope to provide you some key insights into what's really important for us and important for groups considering applying, it's not going to be exhaustive. And so we have tried to develop an informational packet that contains, every kind of bit of piece of information you may want. And so that today is a chance to just learn more about some of those things that are uniquely about what SVP is trying to do, as well as a space then to address questions that you maybe have after hearing some of the information that we'll share today or that you've reviewed in advance. There are a lot of people on this call, which we're really excited about. And so one of the things that we'll just note is that one of the primary ways that we'd like to do questions today is through the chat. And that helps us not only track all of the questions, just in case we aren't able to get to all of them, we can follow up afterwards, but will also just keep us moving. Something else that you can just do right now, I'd invite you to just introduce yourself in the chat, just yourself and your organization affiliation if you have one. just so we can get a sense of who's with us today. The second thing that I'll share, and then we'll really get going in earnest, is that this is Social Venture Partner Philadelphia's inaugural investment cycle. And so we really do see this as an opportunity to learn with the organizations that we support, asking for feedback along the way so that we are in the process of becoming a better partner and funder in the work that we do together. And so again, we're just really pleased that you're with us today. And without further ado, we'll go ahead and just get started looking at what is really the nuts and bolts of this investment. As Francesca mentioned, it's not only the funding, it's also capacity building support. And we really want to emphasize that capacity building support aspect of what we're doing. When we talk about capacity building support, this is where we see the opportunities to really build relationships between social venture partners and the groups that we're investing in. And that capacity building, what does it really mean? We define it as really developing core skills, developing leadership, culture, organizational practices that will enhance an organization's effectiveness, sustainability, and ability to effectively fulfill their mission. It's going to be very relationship oriented for us, and we feel it's essential that grantees are driving the capacity building based on their priorities and interests. For organizations, it's going to be an opportunity to connect with people in our social venture partners network like Francesca and Sharak and others that bring experience and expertise in specific areas like board development, fundraising, marketing, program development. And for social venture partners, we really see this as an opportunity to be connected with frontline leaders who are really advancing the work so that we can continue to develop our own learning and understanding around the issues and become better partners and funders in this work. Some of that might seem still a little bit vague, a little bit wishy-washy. And so what we want to do is actually provide an illustration that can better outline what this actually looks like in practice. Social Venture Partners Philadelphia is actually the newest chapter in the Global Social Venture Partners Network. And so we don't have an example from our own history to tell just yet. And so this example actually comes from one of the other 42 partner or social venture partner chapters globally, and is going to come from SVP Seattle. And so we invite you to enjoy this kind of 4-minute video that gives insight into one of their stories. And we're excited about this because we're really building on a proven model that has seen a lot of success in other cities. And so we will just transition to that video now.
My name is Shefali Ranganathan, and I'm the director at Transportation Choices Coalition. So we are a statewide nonprofit, and we are in the job of making it easier for you to get around. So whether it's taking a bus, catching a train, walking or biking, our job is to make sure that there's the money to fund transit and all those choices, but also to make sure that streets are safe for people to use them. And that's for everyone, including car users. The one thing that we found that was missing in our campaign was a compelling narrative. The work that we do tends to get really wonky and really in the weeds, but it's not the way to attract supporters and to tell a story. And what we found was we really needed to humanize the story of transportation. So we put out a request with social venture partners to see if we could get a volunteer that could help us with a strategic communications plan. And boy, did we get lucky.
My name is Raquel Russell, and I am an SVP partner. To me, Social Venture Partners was the best way to learn my new community. So I moved in March, and I think by April, I was an SVP partner. So it wasn't a hard sell for me. My job at the White House was many things, but one aspect of the job is really about issue-based communications and policy communications, and figuring out a way to take a message, take something that's really complicated, a policy or an agenda that is extremely complex and complicated, and really boiling it down for the masses.
She approached the problem like she was handling an Obama administration issue, right? It was the same level of commitment. She brought new ideas to the table and really helped ground us and focus us in terms of the messages and sort of reminding us that, hey, this is about people.
Primary narrative really was about by supporting and investing in transit, we're really helping to bring the American dream to all residents of King County. You have the mom who is trying to hold down a full-time job and get to school, and transit's the only thing that allows her to be able to do both.
So we ended up with a fantastic media plan and communications plan that we are going to be rolling out. It's going to be our way to tell our stories, to bring faces to this campaign, and to really humanize the story of transit. We are in our third year at SVP, and I'll tell you, it has transformed the organization from everything from fundraising to communications to board management and development to executive coaching. SVP has been a partner with us every step of the way.
I've always worked on social impact issues, and as I moved from government to the private sector, I still wanted to be able to feel connected to that work, and so SVP was going to allow me to do that. I think philanthropy is so important, but there's a fulfillment that you get when you're actually doing it versus just giving, and to me that's really powerful.
So hopefully that illustration just gives you a sense of the kind of relationship that the capacity building provides us a unique opportunity to provide to frontline leaders who we really want to amplify and support the work that is happening from these fantastic organizations that we know exist within Philadelphia.
Okay, so let's get to the point, right? Like, how do you get this investment? This is a very self-explanatory slide. I think it's great. It shows you the 4 areas that we've chosen, at least for our initial grant cycle, to support. So the key thing with this slide is, do you fit into any of these categories? If you do, you're golden, and we're ready to move to the next concept. And also, because it's such a simple slide, I do want to say, if you find anything that we're doing too simple or too complicated, or you have any questions, I'm going to encourage you, and we're all going to encourage you, to please write into the chat box and ask your questions, and we'll answer them as we go along. So you've got the 4 categories, and now we want to tell you basically that these are the types of organizations that work in these 5 areas are the types we want to support. So I just want to go through these with you really quickly to try and help you understand. When we say creating alternatives to existing systems, we mean that we're looking for organizations that want to operate on a high level to make the most change possible. So we call it a systems level, like if you were to look at our groups, like the educational system, the transportation system, these kinds of things. We're looking for organizations also that want to do some coalition building, right? So they want to basically maximize their impact by partnering with other organizations, either nonprofit or for-profit, in the area so they can support each other. And we call that leveraging your abilities to do whatever it is that you're looking to do. Often that's a great way to do systems change. We're looking for organizations that want to change the lens through which people see a problem. Organizations that are on the ground experiencing issues that need to be brought to light, and through their lens, they're adding a different perspective and putting it out there. We call that changing the public narratives. Policy advocacy, that's pretty explicit. And then community organizing, that takes different shapes for different organizations. And I want you to understand that for any of your work, we do not put our lens on what your community needs or how it should organize. We're really interested in learning about your lens. So all of this is targeted directly to what you guys are doing.
It's something that in talking with other funders and other groups that really are trying to support organizations that are doing work at a systems level, we found that organizations that are often having the most success in advancing systems change are often really clear that that's in fact what they're intending to do, that they are led by and for those who are most impacted by the issues that they're organizing around, that they use a race and class analysis to understand their issue, and they have a root cause approach that informs their response. And so those are just some additional characteristics that may help you to understand and look at your own programs, campaigns, opportunities to understand if the work that you're doing is systems change work. So now we'll talk a little bit about eligibility criteria.
Right. You have to be a 501c3. That's an easy, you're in or you're out. You need a full-time executive director and a board of directors. You can read these yourselves. I don't really need to read them for you. We have had some questions on the fourth bullet, which is really, what does it mean to self-identify? And the answer to that is that our organization has decided to take a trust-based approach to grant making. And that trust-based approach means essentially that we look to you as the experts in the field. We want to know where you think you are, what your organization is, and support your organization moving forward. As I said before, we're not substituting anyone else's judgment for yours. In fact, we want to learn from you and support you. So as an extension of that, we won't define your organization. We are looking to you to ask you whether you define your organization as being led by and serving Black, Indigenous, or people of color.
In addition, we've had a couple early questions come in about the operating budget. And so our criteria is that organizations must have an operating budget between 250,000 and 2 million. And the question that we've received is if we are part of a program of a larger organization and our program budget falls within that range, but our total organizational budget does not, is just the program able to apply? And our response is that we are wanting the full organizational budget to be within that range. And so if that is the situation that you're in, that program would not be able to apply if the total operating budget of the organization does not fall within that range.
Yeah, and if I can hop on that for a minute, I'll take that same response to the question of, we have a program that is led by and serving Black, Indigenous, or people of color within a larger organization that is not. And the question is, if that applies to you, can you apply? And you have the same answer, I'm sorry, that Eriks just gave for the question about money. We're really seeking to, at least in this grant cycle, we're really seeking to support groups that do self-identify at the organizational level.
In addition to those initial bullets, to apply, we also would like each of these things to be true. And the first bullet, committed to work with social venture partners to assess as organizational strengths and needs, develop a capacity building plan, and execute the capacity building plan. What does that commitment really mean? And so just anticipating that question, I thought I'd provide the response that there are a couple things that perhaps will display that commitment. One, it's that you have staff and board that are willing to give time to each step of that process, right? Around assessing organizational strengths, needs, and opportunities, developing a capacity building plan, and then also working to execute the capacity building plan. That also means willing to build relationships with social venture partners, our Philadelphia Partner Network, that will be partnering with you and supporting the efforts that will be driven forward. And the third piece that I would say is just really important to that commitment is also a willingness to be open about what is working and what isn't. And that would be true not only for what's going on organizationally, but also in relationship with us. And just to be really thoughtful that the best working relationship is going to be one where kind of feedback and honesty is going both ways. And we understand that that takes time. And so that's where that commitment to building that relationship is going to be pretty key to a successful relationship between our organizations. Beyond that, have a geographic focus on the city of Philadelphia and have a mission focused in one or more of the 4 following areas, which we covered earlier. The last piece, again, came up earlier. Francesca talked us through some really good examples of what each of the areas around addressing systems change or doing systems level work. And I just wanted to address one more question that we had earlier. And the question was, can a direct service organization apply? And so we thought we would offer just an example to talk about why it depends. And so just this example comes from the healthcare field because healthcare is just outside of our funding area. But imagine that you have essentially like a community health clinic that's providing direct services in terms of medicine, checkups, other kinds of medical attention for people who are underinsured or uninsured in their community. That's like direct service, meeting people's needs. It's very important, and that's not within what we're seeking to fund. However, if you imagine a similar community clinic that is offering direct service in terms of care, medicine, any kinds of checkups, things to the population that they're working with, and then in addition to that, they're also working to organize the folks that they're serving to provide like advocacy to the public health at the local level, or to inform policy that's happening around decisions that are being made that would impact that population. That's where then it becomes not only direct services, but also systems change work. Another example too that's outside of our funding area that I'll provide is actually based and rooted here in Philadelphia. Back in 1984, the mayor at the time formed the Philadelphia Anti-Graffiti Network as there was concerns around how that was impacting perception of the city. And essentially kind of a group came forward out of conversations that was really reframed what the situation was and changed the public narrative, created an alternative to the current system that ultimately became mural arts, where they said, we're going to go to these same graffiti artists and engage them around creating public art in these murals. And that will actually create additional value, create additional jobs, and create a benefit to the city. And so they changed that public narrative around what was really happening and created an opportunity from that. And so as direct services, people were painting murals, but it was also systems change work to change how people were addressing and thinking about what was going on in that situation. So with those criteria then, naturally the next question then is, what is going to make an organization stand out through the process?
So let me just start before we head into this. I just want to start by saying, if any of you think that your organizations fit in to the guidelines that we're looking for, to the parameters that we've just shown you, please apply. We're hoping as many organizations apply as possible, because whether or not you're selected, we have an opportunity to see what's going on in our community. And that may affect not only this round of funding, but other rounds of funding and other parameters we may choose in the future. And it will start us off, at least initially, with new partners and new resources. And who knows, individuals in our community of SVP partners may want to individually engage with your organizations. So we'd love to get as wide a net as we can and to get to know as many of you as we can. Having said that, we will have to select an organization that does fit in within the parameters we've given you for this round of funding. So how do you make sure that you do? And Erik's just described a systems analysis with mural arts. So if you're thinking along those lines, I can also give you an example of a really innovative nonprofit in Philadelphia that I have funded as part of another grant-making organization that works on addiction. And they do such a good job on addiction. They're great to use for this example because they now inform and help the mayor of the city of Philadelphia treating problems all over the city. So they really jump to the systems approach, but yet they are still doing work and lots of great work on their own directly. So they have been able to do the first bullet. The second bullet is demonstrating an impact. They have made a difference. They have gotten, they have helped people become I guess, recovering addicts. They are meeting addicts where they are. They are achieving their mission. They can show you the outcomes, how many people are doing what in the city. They have people who were addicted, who know that the kind of treatment that worked for them, working within their organization, helping other people. So that's the third bullet. They include those most affected by the issue in doing their work. The fourth is having staff and board capacity who want to work with SVP. Well, that wasn't a thing because that grant maker doesn't give capacity building, but we do. So if you guys want to work with us and help us learn more about you and support you where you need it, that's something we're really looking for. And the last thing is really, are you guys ready to jump to the next level? Are you at a point in your organization where you've decided you really want to move forward and you need extra support to do that? You just can't do that on your own, either financially or with the people you have. So that's the inflection point language. So let me just, while you guys read this, I don't want you to be intimidated by anything you see here. The word limit is not a requirement. It is a no more than. There is no minimum amount of words you can have in your application. We just don't want you to take forever to have to do this or think too hard about it or give us a research paper. So it's either a document or a PDF that answers the questions or a video link. That's what you need to submit to us. And here's a tip. The way to do that is to look at the questions carefully, see what they're asking, and just respond to those questions. You don't have to respond to things you think we may be thinking. So the first step of the process is really just that first step for you guys, and then it's all on us. Then we read what you've said and we do some due diligence on what's in the community and on your organization. And then we will, unfortunately, have to pare down the number of applicants we have to a smaller group. And that step involves another issue of an application, essentially, a full proposal. And when we get to that step, we'll be asking for organizational documents. And then we'll have a larger word limit for that. And then we'll be doing interviews.
And so a lot of the reason behind why we've adopted this approach is because as an organization, we've adopted a trust-based approach. And that means a few different things, but a really important thing is that we are working to reduce the amount of time spent by nonprofits and organizations, both in like applying and reporting. We know that your mission is really front and center and the key part of your work. And so anything that we can do to make this an easier process to be eligible, we're seeking to do that. And so that's where, starting with a letter of interest to just, we don't want to be asking for the world and more from all of the organizations, knowing that ultimately we won't be able to provide the kinds of funding and support we want to all groups. So that's a big part of the reason behind why we're using this approach. The second bullet there is also just really key, is that we're going to do the due diligence as much as we can on our side to also reduce the burden on groups that are in the application process. And so anything that we're able to find out through our work, we're going to try to take and own that piece so that you're able, as an applicant, as a nonprofit that's really doing key crucial work, to focus on the work that you're doing.
I just also want to say the submissions are going to come in through our website. We'll have an investment cycle website, and you'll put all your documents in there. You'll create your own account. And so don't forget that. Don't send it by email or anything else, because otherwise it may get missed.
The good news is it's likely the same website that you've already visited. Tomorrow at 8 a.m. there will be the opportunity to apply to kind of go through, enter your organizational information, and then submit your letter of interest. And so if you visited an initial landing page that had information about this opportunity, that's the place that you'll return to.
So, you know, in the spirit of transparency, we just want to share with you what our process is so you can have an idea about the length of time you're going to be waiting to find out answers to whether or not you've got the grant. And so we do have a sort of a tight timeline for you guys. By the 5th of March, we'd like to receive your letters of interest. And I want to repeat again, we're not looking for a term paper. What we really just want is something thoughtful about your organization that just simply takes the things that we're looking at and matches them with what you guys do. The rest will happen. We'll, you know, if you're included in the RFP stage, then we'll be, you know, sending you information about that as well.
So that was essentially the key information that we just wanted to highlight that maybe makes this process or gives you some insight into who we are. And so we're going to transition to questions here. And I know hopefully a number of questions have been being responded to in the chat. The rest of our time is kind of for us to address these kinds of situations. But just before we do that, I do want to pause just for a moment to see or to invite Jen or Shahrukh to see if there's just anything else that you'd like to add as we spin into questions here.
I'll just speak to one question I think we've seen a couple of times, and then Jen, I'll ask if you could speak to the other question that we seem to see a few times. So the one I'll address is regarding the issue areas. So you know, it's been mentioned several times that we are focused on systems change, and we enumerated the 4 issue areas that we're focused on for this cycle. If an organization had reach into more than one of those issue areas, that certainly is compelling because we see the systems change being necessary across issues. There, you know, doing this in silos is not necessarily a long-term effective strategy for the city. So definitely, if you see yourselves as being focused on one or more of the issue areas, you know, that's definitely very interesting to us. And then Jen, do you mind just trying to give us a little bit more clarity on the local versus national organizational structures that may qualify or disqualify an organization from applying?
Sure. Thanks, Shar. So the question has come up a few times that if you're part of a larger national organization with a budget over the $2 million, but your local organization does not receive funding or is fiscally sponsored by that national organization, you are indeed still eligible to apply. We ask in our application if you have a fiscal sponsor. We know that there are various structures to how nonprofits are operating. So we just ask you to explain the relationship and to outline how you are separate from that organization and you know what your financials look like. So hopefully that answers the question, but I encourage everyone to continue asking questions in the chat or emailing us afterwards for a specific scenario that you might have a question on. And I also just wanted to highlight, I just saw a question come through about the criteria. Came from Megan. You have alluded that this is the criteria eligibility for this funding cycle. Will the criteria eligibility change for subsequent cycles? And when will the subsequent cycles occur? So the answer to that question is that as a new organization in Philadelphia, that you know we will continue to learn and to grow, and that through this process we may tweak or alter the criteria for future cycles. So as much as possible, we welcome your feedback on how this process goes for you and what you think of it. Again, our partners are here to learn from your efforts and to help to amplify and champion your work. So if you are open to it, feedback is always welcome.
A couple of other questions that have come through. we are recording this session. We will make it available to all participants so that you can refer back to anything, and also for people who are interested in this opportunity who weren't available to be on this call today. So rest assured, we will make this available. And then there was a question about if a organization is awarded and receives the funding and capacity building support. There was a question about enhanced program priorities. I would just ask for clarification of what's being asked there, but I will go one step further and just say that oftentimes when funders get into the conversation about what an organization is doing, they'll oftentimes try to dictate how you measure impact and what metrics you use to realize that impact. And our ethos, I'll call it, without having gone into it too deeply, is really to allow you to set the tone for how you measure yourselves, and then we follow your lead in that regard. So we would just like to set the expectation that we're not looking to define how you should measure yourselves. Rather, we're looking to follow from you and be a partner in understanding how you're delivering that impact into the communities that you serve. But I realize that may not have been Casey's question, so a clarification could be made. We'll try to answer that question properly. There was also a question about BIPOC leadership. The requirement is that you self-identify, your organization, self-identifies as BIPOC-led and or serving. That is the requirement that we're putting out there. And so we would ask each organization to make that determination themselves. And that would be the criteria for applying.
Yeah, and I can help or just add on to what Sharuk shared. I mean, we know that identity is especially fluid and sometimes difficult to parse. We know it's really not appropriate for us as a funder to tell organizations who they are. And so the requirement, though, is that it is a requirement that this is part of the eligibility, that organizations do self-identify as being led by and serving Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And so that's not just a preference. And if people are curious about how did we come to that determination, that we want to fund groups that have this as part of their organizational makeup, it really kind of stems from two different pieces. Number one, we talked earlier about what do effective systems change look like, and we talked about it's really being based in organizations that are really being led by and serving those most impacted by the issues. And in Philadelphia, you can look at the data from the census, you can look at any number of kind of sources, but we know that particularly Black Philadelphians, that Philadelphians that identify within kind of the Latinx or Latin spectrum, and even that if you kind of disaggregate between Philadelphians of Asian descent, that those groups are overrepresentative of those experiencing poverty. And so for us to say that if we're going to address poverty, we really need to be funding organizations that are close to the communities that are experiencing it most deeply. There's also a second piece that's really important for us too, and that's to acknowledge that philanthropy traditionally has not funded organizations led by and serving people of color to the same rates that they have funded white-led organizations. And so we want to just be really aware of what we are a part of ourselves as a funder, and also working to just respond to that reality as well. So hopefully, Debbie, that speaks to your question. I mean, I see also that you said, is this a requirement or preference, and how would that relate to leadership for staff as a whole? Something that we are curious to see eventually for groups that are invited to fill out a proposal and provide more organizational information is just some of the demographics behind board, staff, and leadership. But again, we aren't putting ourselves in a position to say like, this is what the cutoff is, this is what makes, for instance, like an Indigenous led and serving organization. We feel that's essentially, that's really for organizations to self-determine. And so I know that feels maybe a little bit slippery, but it really is an extension of our trust-based approach to say like, organizations know best how they identify.
Can I just pop in here to help applicants in responding to this question based upon the questions Eriks was addressing? If you think that you are, that your organization, if your organization does self-identify as we're asking in this grant cycle, but you think that it may not appear that way, please feel free to share in your LOI, in your letter of interest, that you may not appear that way, but here's why you are. You know, sort of bring us into the circle. Don't leave it as an unanswered question, because we are asking you how you identify, and we really want to understand that. So we may miss the opportunity to understand that if you don't share that with us in the first, you know, sort of first go round. So please be open with us and share these things with us and allow us to embrace your view of yourselves, because you'd see sort of in the middle of the presentation when we talked about the groups we support, we really are looking for organizations that sort of see through the lens of race and social class, and sort of bring those narratives to the fore. So all of the sort of things we talked about are really consistent throughout the way we're going to be viewing applicants. And we want to make sure that if you're that applicant, that we can see that in your LOI.
I just want to raise a question that Albert Pack asked about preference for funding established programs versus new initiatives or programs. I'll take a stab and then ask any of my colleagues to chime in, but there really isn't a preference for established versus new initiatives. In fact, I think we want to stay away from trying to force you to create new work for yourselves. What we're focused on really is whether the work you're doing or looking to do potentially is systems change work in one or more of the issue areas that we're focusing on for this grant cycle. So we don't want to give, again, part of that trust-based philanthropy model that has really been the foundation of this work for us. We're not looking to pigeonhole you into doing something net new because you are looking to acquire this investment. If you're living and breathing that already every day, then we want you to make that argument, and it would, you know, it would stand very well, I believe. So just to make that point.
Sure, and sort of their core mission grants, and I hope that that question, if that question came because we talked about the fact that your organization should be at an inflection point, and that made you think that maybe you needed to do something new. No, we're supporting your core mission. We are looking for, you know, for organizations that need this money to help them grow, and are at a good, and are poised to grow, I should say, but growing in the way that your mission is driving you.
These are all fantastic questions. Please keep them coming as you continue to have them.
We also seem to have fallen into a pattern of questions only coming through the chat. This is by no means meant to just be a talking session by you know, a handful of us. We're more than happy to have people unmute and ask questions, and, you know, even allow a dialogue to ensue if that's helpful for everyone.
There was a question about our website, and I just wanted to note that we are new to the market and finishing up our website. So we have put up a microsite, which Eriks put into the chat, but we will send that link out to everyone who's registered, where you can find the information about this investment cycle.
And if you tried unmuting earlier and you found that you were unable, we've now kind of lifted that lock. So if you do want to voice a question, you may unmute yourselves now and raise that for the benefit of all gathered here. Well, although it doesn't seem like there are many more questions coming through at this point, what I can share with you is that we really appreciate that you are joining us today, that you have interest in this investment opportunity and the work that Social Venture Partners is beginning here in Philadelphia. This is not your last opportunity to ask questions. And so if you're like me and you have like a great inspiration 5 minutes after the meeting ends, please reach out, please ask questions, please connect with us. We're here to talk through things, to discuss with you. And so I've provided my contact information on this slide. Again, we'll also be posting this recording on the website. There are ways to get in touch with us. And so please don't hesitate to do so. So with that being said, I'll just open it up to any of our, to Sharik, Jen, Francesca, anything else before we wrap it up?
Thank you for joining us. It's been a
Great.
pleasure seeing you over Zoom, and we hope to see more of you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your time, definitely.
We're looking forward to getting to know all of your work and appreciate you joining us. And as I said before, would welcome any feedback about our process and how this is going for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.